My name is Bob Knight. I'm the Merle H. Benzinger Professor of Gerontology here at the USC Davis School of Gerontology, and also professor in the Department of Psychology here. I'm a clinical psychologist by training, and I've been focusing on working with older adults really since I was in graduate school, getting my PhD in clinical psychology. One of the things I really like to cover in classes when I'm teaching younger people primarily about aging and older adults is to be sure and talk some about the sexual changes that come with aging, and really get across to people that sex is an important part of life for older adults. I find it's often kind of surprising to younger people to think about this, and everybody as they're in their late teens and early 20s seems to like they're discovering sex for the first time themselves, and it's hard to think of people who are much older than you still really having sexual lives. As a clinical psychologist working with older adults, I've worked a lot with both individuals and couples, and talk with them about what's going on in their lives, and not only focusing on sexual activity, but talking with them about sex as a part of their lives. And it's often one of the things that will come up in working with couples is how the physical side of their affectional relationship is going, and changes in that, particularly as one or the other of them gets physically ill or maybe becomes disabled in some way. How important is sex in the lives of older adults? I think, like with everybody at any age, it kind of varies depending on the person and their circumstances. In the context of a loving relationship, I think that sex remains important for people throughout life. It's an important part of keeping excitement about life, keeping the love relationship going. It helps keep people from getting depressed. There's been some papers in the past even suggesting that continuing to have an active sexual life is a good preventive measure for depression and suicide in older adults, including older adults in nursing home situations. I think Viagra's had a lot of effects on the way that people are thinking about sex and sex and aging these days. On the positive side, I think for people that where that level of performance is important to them as a couple, and the drug is effective without major side effects, it can have a real positive effect. On the downside, I think one of the things that actually surprised me when I was younger myself and first starting to work with older adults and talking about sexual issues is that a lot of older men actually found the changes in sex associated with aging to be kind of positive for them. That they would talk about the lessened sex drive that they felt in their lives as meaning that they were in charge of sex rather than sex being in charge of them. A number of men talked about how the slowing down of the sexual cycle and the lessened urgency about sex really gave them time to appreciate sexual experiences, and they felt that they were more on the same wavelength with their partner, and really kind of taking a slower, easygoing, more enjoyable approach. Early on in my career, I saw a couple that were in their 70s that had been married since they were about 20 years of age, and actually they were quite concerned about their sexual life. In fact, the guy had become quite depressed because their sex life had stopped, and it actually had turned out that they had a very active sex life up until about 6 months to a year before, and he had stopped because he was having coffee with some of his male friends at the diner, and that they were all talking about how sex was no longer part of their lives, and then he brought it up with his doctor, and the doctor said, well, past 70 years of age, you really shouldn't be having sex anymore. So he kind of took this to heart, and they stopped their sex life. And one of the surprises I got from it as a young psychologist working with older adults is when I started talking with them about what their sex life had been like prior to this, is that they had, from their 20s and on up until about age 70, had been having sex 3 times a day on a regular basis, and it kind of stopped cold. This rarely actually happens in clinical practice, but sometimes when you have misinformation like this about sex affecting somebody, actually just being able to tell somebody what the true situation is can lead to major changes quite quickly. And so when I just told them that what their doctor had told them was wrong, and that in fact there was nothing wrong with people continuing their sex lives as long as they were able to do so, and it was a natural part of aging. They were both delighted to hear this, and the next week they both came back into the therapy session with big smiles on their faces, and I really didn't even have to ask how things had gone that previous week. So as the person with dementia gets progressively more cognitively impaired, the unaffected spouse can really have a lot of different reactions to that, and have very different feelings about whether they want to continue a sexual relationship with a person with dementia. I think some people find that with the intellectual decline, the cognitive changes, what a lot of people even perceive as personality changes, that they see this person as not really still being their spouse, and can really feel very negative about continuing a sexual relationship. It can feel very odd to be participating in sex with somebody who's not fully cognitively intact. On the other hand, for some caregivers, spouse caregivers, it's still a very important part of their lives, and one of the ways that they still feel connected with the person with dementia, and it's an ongoing extension of their love for this person that's already been going on for years, in most cases decades in fact, and it feels like a very natural, caring part of the relationship. And I think one of the things people experience in a lot of domains, not just in sex, is that there's still an emotional connection and a feeling of oneness with the spouse that can transcend the intellectual impairment. I think one of the challenges for people getting older in our society is our culture puts so much focus on beauty and physical attractiveness. It surrounds us all the time in advertising and movies and television, and holds out a pretty high standard, and a high standard that's mostly anchored on fairly young people, although I've seen some changes in that across my adult life. I mean, you do see people being held forth now as attractive who are on into their 40s, 50s, sometimes even around 60.